Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. This diorama is called the Scarecrow. Most of my projects begin with an idea of a scene, but this project began more or less as a concept which then turned into a scene. For the concept, I wanted to see if I could create movement in a diorama. And then my inspiration turned into a cornfield, then with a scarecrow in it. So I thought, I'm going to create a cornfield with a scarecrow whose coat is blowing in the breeze. So come and join me, and let's go and see how this thing was made. The first thing I did was to start making the cornfield. These bamboo sticks were the perfect height, and I thought their natural colour would synchronise well with the dried leaves. For the corn leaves, I'm using tissue paper, which I'll stain using an acrylic blend of yellow ochre and burnt sienna. The paper is dipped into the wash and hung up to dry. And here's the result. I didn't stain the leaves too much as I was wanting a natural dried corn leaf colour. Looking at these shots in editing, I feel the camera has oversaturated the leaves with a bit too much yellow, but in real life they're a lot more toned down than what you're seeing on the screen. To make the leaf shapes, I made templates of different sizes to cut around to form the leaves. When I started, I wasn't sure how many leaves I would need, so this process was repeated several times. To add some variety to the tissue paper leaves, I also added some leaves made from raffia twine. Okay, now to glue the leaves to the stalks. I found the most realistic and easiest method was dipping the end of each leaf into PVA, then wrapping it around the stalk. I did research pictures of corn to get a rough idea of how they grow. This taught me that each leaf layer has two opposing leaves, and the small leaves are mainly towards the lower part of the stalk, moving up to the longer and larger leaves, then tapering up to smaller ones. One thought I had while working on the corn was, how realistic do I need to make these parts? I often struggle with the need to create objects that look totally lifelike, and I've got to consistently remind myself that I'm creating a picture, a small scene whose main goal is to feel real. So, does the corn feel real? If the answer is yes, then I call that a success. So here's a completed stalk, and I think in the end I made about 80 of these things. Now you guys know how I spend my nights. Now this technique I discovered by accident. I had originally planned on weathering the leaves using acrylic washes, but on testing this, it didn't turn out so well. As I was drying a stalk over the burner, the edges started to colour, the exact effect I was trying to create with the paint. Ignoring the obvious safety concerns here, I passed each stalk gently over the hot air from the stove, which created a nice gradient on the edge of the leaves. I also think it gives the leaves a cool sun-scorched look, which adds to the vibe of the overall scene. Now to get the stalks onto some kind of base, and a cork mat was the obvious choice. Here I'm marking where the stalks will go. I planned for 3 rows, and I've alternated the spacing to avoid any visual gaps. I was thinking the diorama needed something to add more visual interest to the foreground and to contrast with all the vertical lines of the corn. And I thought an old fence would do just the trick. Here I'm shaping some balsa sticks into fence posts. Next, the fence rails. And here I'm soaking the wood with water stained with a bit of paint. The water helps soften the wood slightly and helps it separate when I scrape the wire brush across it to create the wood grain. I repeated this step until I thought the grooves were deep enough. The same process was repeated with the fence posts. After that, I stain the fence with a dark brown wash. On some recent country walks, I noticed that a lot of fence posts have burnt patches on them, which I thought was a really cool effect. So I'm trying to recreate this here. Then the parts of the fence were glued together. Now most of the foreground elements are done, it's time to make the ground mixture. I tend to fluctuate between store-bought dirt products and making my own. For this diorama, I wanted a very specific tone of grey dirt, so I'm making my own. The dirt layer is a mixture of acrylic modelling paste, dirt from the garden, which I sterilised first, and PVA. So my plan is to add the corn one row at a time, then add the dirt mixture, then the next row, and so on. As I'm laying on the dirt mixture, I'm very conscious of not leaving behind too many spatula marks, so I'm trying to keep my strokes as random as possible. While the dirt is still wet, I can press in the fence. I originally had this rail attached to the fence, but it fell off, so instead of trying to reconnect it, I thought it might look good as a ground feature. And here's the main part of the foreground completed. Now the cork base is a little flexible and has warped slightly with the dirt mixture, so I'm attaching it to a masonite board. Now I'm just adding some leaf scatter to add some detail and interest to the foreground. Okay, now for the Scarecrow himself. One of my favourite Scarecrow looks comes from the Jeepers Creepers movies. so I tried to recreate this silhouette as best I could out of foam board. I could have used cardboard, but I feel the thicker foam board may help with adding a little bit of dimension to the final silhouette. To have the Scarecrow's coat flapping in the breeze in the final effect, I'm making the first layer out of a piece of black cloth. I'm making lots of jagged cuts in the cloth in the hope these will catch the wind and provide a more interesting silhouette. When testing the silhouette, I thought that the hat needed to be a bit more 3D, so I made a crude 3D hat out of scrap parts. Then for the back layer of the silhouette, I've cut up a piece of black napkin. I used napkin paper because I need this layer to be lighter than the cloth. Every Scarecrow needs a post, and this one is made from a chopstick and a piece of balsa. A bit of a dark stain added to the post, and the Scarecrow is ready to be glued on. After the glue was dry, I added the napkin paper to the back. Now this looks strange and very crude as it is, but remember, it's the silhouette these components make that matters. Now the frosted panel is going into place. I added some fencing to the rear of the diorama that should fade into the distance behind the screen. Now the Scarecrow can take up his position. Okay, here's where the original concept of having the Scarecrow's cloak blowing in the wind comes to life. This is a small CPU fan with a USB cable and creates the perfect amount of wind for a diorama of this size. I experimented with the position of the fan to try and get the wind to hit the fabric at the right angle. I've added mirror to the side panels to give depth to the scene in areas where you may be able to see through the corn stalks. Then, after playing around with a few minor details and touches to the foreground, the ceiling panel can go on. This is the lamp that will backlight the diorama. I've added pieces of cellophane to the lamp to create a sunset gradient. And I'm going to attach the lamp to the back panel of the diorama. This is a piece of light diffusing acrylic which will spread the light from the lamp. And here's the box I made from recycled boards and a picture frame. And finally, the completed diorama can go into its house, and we'll call it a night. Okay, let's see this thing with the light on. Thanks so much for watching and for all your support. I'm off to make another diorama, and this time we're going sci-fi. I'll see you then.